All right, we'll move on to the next and last but not least by any means talk. This is by Kim Jensen, entitled 40 Years of Water Chestnut Management in Lake Champlain. Kim is an aquatic biologist with the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation. She oversees the Aquatic Invasive Species Program. Throughout her career, she has implemented a wide range of applications to protect, conserve, restore ecosystems and waterways, ranging from management of aquatic species to installation of green stormwater infrastructure projects and many other things. I won't go into them all, but there's certainly a lot here. I'm gonna, because we're a little short of time, I'm just gonna turn it right over to Kim and let you go. Thank you so much for giving your talk.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for inviting me to present 40 years of water chestnut management on Lake Champlain. I certainly have not been there for the entire 40 years, but hopefully I can give you a bit of an overview of our program. So it's first documented in the 1940s in Lake Champlain, most likely introduced through the Mohawk River to the Hudson River Canal and into the Champlain Canal. This is a picture of the Champlain Canal and the abundance of it. It does flow from the Champlain Canal, which is all the way down here in the map, and into Champlain Lake proper. This is the entire Champlain Lake, and then you can see the colors where the management takes place. So we have management that takes place in the Champlain region, southern Champlain region, all the way up to Missisquoi National Wildlife Refuge and beyond. We have 81 sites on both sides of Lake Champlain, and we have 30 plus inner water bodies as well that are infested with water chestnut. Population is on a decreasing trend, which is fabulous, and the goal is to reduce mechanical operations to hand pulling and monitoring operations. So I'm going to run through some of the operations and what our new technologies are as well. So in the 70s, the population was pretty abundant throughout the southern area, and the New York DC and Vermont Fish and Wildlife actually went out and harvested the population, and they thought they were done. They thought it was a very phenomenal operation and success. They did mention to keep searching, but unfortunately they stopped searching, and the population exploded into the entire basin. And so we have different operations now. I'm sorry, I'm seeing myself and I don't want to see myself. So we have different types of operations, and we have hand pulling operations. Those are the lead team in the green, and then we have larger crews that go out. Mostly the Vermont Youth Conservation goes out into the tributary areas and the larger populations, so we can have more people searching. We also started a new operation, hand pulling with John boats. So they go out where the mechanical harvesting is taking place to try to get to the sides and the shorelines where the mechanical harvesters cannot reach. So the operations are pretty successful. The hand harvesting are in sites that are less than 25% cover, less than 15,000 rosettes. It's kind of in those sporadic growths where it's really hard to find. And so we do very thorough surveys. And out of all the sites, the 81 sites, 67 sites are hand pulled. And it's a distance of about 127 miles on both sides. The spoils are deposited in the sites above the water level. Mechanical harvesting takes place at locations that are more than 25% and more than 15,000 rosettes generally. And generally it's a mat of water chestnut. And 13 sites are mechanically harvested, and the distance for the operation is about 13 miles, and the spoils are trucked off site and dumped into other locations. So this is just a snapshot of our hand harvesting operations. Generally, we have an access site, and then it's a long paddle to those sites. This is one particular site called Balaga Bay, and it's a long paddle. It's about a 4-mile paddle, and sometimes you can unfortunately get into areas where it's really hard to paddle, especially if the weather turns. So people have to really have some paddling skills and abilities, and we also have to have some safety protocols in place to be able to get back to those sites, which may be more safe than being out in the open water. It's also hard to access the shoreland because a lot of times there's nothing there, there's farmlands or forest land, so we can't just get off the water and walk back to our cars. So these sites are generally accessed and harvested twice per year. The mechanical harvesting sites are in red and orange and blue. Those are our new sites. And so some of the challenges there, again, is just getting access to those sites, which can be far away. We do have a site that we're using, thankfully, from New York, DEC. This is our old site in Vermont that we're no longer able to use. So there are challenges, again, for the mechanical harvesters. And these spoils are removed and then dumped and composted. So this season was pretty successful, as it has been for many years. You can see some of the stats from this year. We harvested around 918 tons of water chestnut mechanically. It's about 23 tractor trail loads, and about 18 ton of water chestnut that were hand harvested. So around 2,100 hand pulling hours. We did have some challenges, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Here's some graphs of our efforts over the years. So the red line is mechanical harvesting, and this is the tons of, or the loads, I'm sorry, of mechanically harvested loads compared to the hand harvested loads in blue, and throughout the years from 1999 to 2021. So it's interesting to see the patterns over the years. This makes sense to me. It may not make sense to you, but generally the patterns follow each other, and the schisms are due to drought conditions or water level conditions. So if we are not able to mechanically harvest, you see some higher levels for hand harvesting, because the hand harvesting can still happen. This dip right here in 2018 is when we changed our practices, and when I came on with DEC to try to target the hand harvesting operations to those sites that really need it, and not to the mechanically harvested sites, which should be just mechanically harvested. So there's some changes happening as we focus in on the management operations. This year we saw an increase based on last year. Last year was a drought condition for us, so it was really hard to get the operators out. We also had COVID, so we had some staffing problems, but this year we saw an increase in both operations. Just to let you know what the numbers look like, because we are trying to move from the mechanical harvesters to hand harvesters. So this is an example of that change and that switchover. So this is the Fort Ticonderoga region. This is about 14 different sites. And In the early 2000s, it was mechanically harvested, and then that was transitioned over to mechanically harvested. So you can see in 2004, when that transition happened, the mechanical harvester obviously bottomed out, and then the hand harvesting really took off. And then over time, it has been reduced to a level. So that shows you a success of the operations. And of course, you have these high numbers that happen when the seed bank is exposed, and we see more plants coming forth. This gives you an example of also some of our hand harvesting operations where we are in thick aquatic emergent vegetation often, and it's really difficult to get into. Our mechanical harvesting operations, this is probably a messy graph to you, but to me it shows some sites that we are able to access one year and perhaps not another year. It also shows you some highs and lows of us being able to get into a site and then not get into a site a following year. This year, this red line is showing where we really utilized a lot more mechanical harvesting at our northern operation, our most northern mechanical harvesting operation. So we can start to work our way south from the most northern mechanically harvested site. So we're really focusing our efforts on that most northern mechanically harvest site. This shows you the mechanical harvesting over time. So mechanical harvested did take place all the way up in the north and more northern central Lake Champlain over the years, but we've been slowly working our way down south. This is Dresden line, and so this is kind of a march. It shows a march of the mechanical harvesting operations moving down south. In 2019, we actually did get to an even more southern location called the Drowned Lands, which is just a huge mat. So this in 2021, it looks about the same, although we did not get to the Drowned Lands this past year. This shows you a little bit about the management operations and how they're funded. So the blue line shows you how far north we had to go with our mechanical harvesting operations. The green line shows you how much money was spent on the operations each year. In the 90s, we lost some funding, and we also, Vermont did not provide as much funding. And so the operations expanded tremendously to Fields Bay, which is that northern central location. And then once funds were provided again to some more sustainable levels, our operations dropped down to the Benson landing area. So that's where we are at now. And so that's where we'd like to stay as well. This is a graphic representation of that. So when the operations didn't happen in the 70s, the population exploded into mats, and mechanical harvesting had to happen in the 80s. In the 90s is when we lost the funding, and some hand pulling operations had taken place, but it could not keep up to the seeds and to the explosion of population. So we had to have mechanical harvesting go back in, and then over time we've been able to reduce the operations for mechanical harvesting to the southern region, and the rest are all hand pulling operations. We do have some satellite populations up north that are now also managed by hand pulling operations. Just to give you a little bit of some funding information, overall, we've spent about $14 million on this project, and about $6 million comes from Army Corps of Engineers. Thank you very much. And Vermont DEC has to match those funds. So we've provided around $4+ million over time. And Lake Champlain Basin Program is a great partner of ours, so they help provide funds for our hand pulling operations. And then we have some other support over the years as well. And with those funding supports, we have to look now at increasing and for having some better technological tools to advance the operations. So this past year, I had a fabulous AmeriCorps service member help digitize all of our historical population maps, which we never had a GIS layer of the population maps. So she went through all of the historical population maps and digitized those so we can see how the range of the different population sites have shifted or in most cases been reduced over time. So you can see in the 80s, well, you can't see in the 80s because layers underneath everything. But in the mid 2000s, this entire section was harvested. And now this past year, in 2020, that population has been reduced to just this back bay area. So this is really helpful for us to be able to target the population in a more feasible manner and to also be able to show where the crews need to go, especially if I'm not on site. Just give you an indication of what it takes to survey. This is a map of Missisquoi National Wildlife Refuge, one of our partners, who track their efforts through GIS. And you can see that surveys are really intense, and sometimes it leads to nothing, but sometimes it really leads to getting down to where those populations are. The yellow is where the population occurred in 2017, and the red is where the population was found in 2018. So it kind of backs up what our digitized maps are finding as well. We also have used drone technology. In the first study, we were hoping that we could use drones to help us monitor and recon where our populations are for hand pulling operations, but that did not prove fruitful. We had another study done to really help us show where the mechanical harvesting operations are and how the sediment may affect where the mechanical operations should be, or where the seed bank may show up over time. So that information is still forthcoming. This is one example from last year to this year's drone survey, and really it doesn't show us much change in the seed bank population. It pretty much stays where it's at. So I was thinking that it might change dramatically over time, but so far it hasn't really helped us with our operations. We also hope to use drones in the future to better image where the populations are. So that's on the roster for the future. Where to next? So we're still working on the southern populations to the regions that were harvested in 2019 and sporadically. So this is basically what those sites look like. They're basically just a matte water chestnut, and often do make the Lake Champlain difficult to navigate for boats. So we keep the channel open, and again, just trying to get down to these areas. And that's located here on that map. We also, unfortunately, have had some new populations sprouting up in different locations. Black Creek Marsh in 2016, which is in a more northern population, trying to control that with volunteers. And now we have crews assigned to those sites. We had a new population pop up in Sandbar State Park and was reported by a camper. Lake Champlain boat stewards have taken that on and found less than 5 rosettes this past year, which was fabulous. We unfortunately found a large population in the Connecticut River. So we're hoping that was a small population, but it's actually quite large. So we'll have to go back to that site. And then we also found a really large site in Sandbar Wildlife Management Area this past year. So having those digitized maps is really helpful, and hopefully we can start better mapping these populations. Also this year, we had a population explosion of a site that we had just monitored. You can see really low populations that were harvested, a little dip in 2014, but this past year, this population exploded into a mat. So it took us about a week to harvest this population with a dozen people. And that was unexpected, and it certainly is a kind of a bummer for us when we're out there and we find this huge mat. But fortunately, we have a great crew that were able to harvest this and pretty quickly for such a large mat. So we do have some challenges for the operations. We have a really short season. Weather conditions are variable. We have had some annual turnover of staff, so they're not familiar with where to go and how to get rid of the spoils. We also really need a flotilla of airboats or Go Devil boats to be able to get at those most southern locations, which cannot be mechanically harvested but are large populations, but we don't really have a place to put them. And then we also have some floating mats that are coming from our southern locations. I'm not sure if that's due to climate change with the extreme weather conditions. Some of the solutions I've already mentioned. We're also developing operations management plans and trying to get better tracked GIS locations. And just to get a better location in Vermont is our next step as well, so we can access these sites more easily. The ultimate solution is really to get me an airboat, because then I could be at 3 different places all in one day, but I'm not sure if that's in the cards. There has been some great progress for this project. So in 2005, this is a picture of one site compared to that same site in 2019. So those mats have been reduced, and we have some floating plants at this site now, but really the mats have been reduced. And this is another site just south of there, and there used to be a real challenge going through that site, and now it's pretty much open and clear. So yay, water chestnut management operations. We've been doing a great job over time, and I can only thank all of those folks that came before me. So Tim Hunt really was the master with the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation, and he retired. Ann Bove kind of stepped into his side shoes, and she was a great help, as well as Solitude, who's our mechanical harvester contract. Meg Modley from Lake Champlain Basin Program comes out every year and helps, and always really looks forward to moving the spoils. Lori Callahan is another who takes care of our Connecticut River site. I also wanted to thank all of my technicians who help me every year, and Carly Alpert, who helped me with the slideshow this year, and also the Vermont Youth Conservation Corps folks. They're all amazing people, and I couldn't do it without them all. So thank you all.
Thank you, Kim.